security, but probably because it's still in the developer tooling space, it's still considered a developer tool. So even though it is AppSec, it's still very much like developer workflow oriented. And that's where I've found most of my career success has been just, I was at Stoplight where we really focused on improving the documentation experience, the spectral rule experience, all of that stuff. And then I found myself at Armory, which was obviously, commercializing Spinnaker and trying to make that workable. And then yeah, now I'm at AppSec. So yeah, I mean the theme is very much still what's going on with developers trying to create code that is scalable and secure. And
Mhm.
when you mention AI coming into the picture, that just confounds the problem a bazillion percent, right? So that's our goal is to try to fix some of these workflow issues so that developers aren't feeling held back and they're feeling empowered and still feel like they can get the job done without introducing so much friction that, things just don't go to production. So
Yeah, yeah. So what is the developer workflow, would you say? I mean, is it radically changed? I mean, if you tune into the news, like everything's different, developers are doing things completely in new ways and we've thrown out everything. But from my experience, that's not always the case.
from my experience, it is that a vendor will try to tell you that it is the case because they want to sell you something, and that something is this is a brand new thing that's so exciting and shiny and new, and your developers will love it, right? That's
Yeah,
that's what the case is.
yeah,
But in reality, it's what it's always been, which is individuals like to work individually in the ways that they appreciate working.
yeah.
And so the more that a place, an enterprise, an organization can support that work in a flexible and sustainable way, the more efficient and effective that work will be. And governing that is always going to be the problem. So the governance question comes back again and again. Doesn't matter where I'm at, doesn't matter what tools
Yeah,
it is, it's always the question of governance.
yeah.
So supporting that developer workflow in a flexible and sustainable way, governance is always the number one question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you can't get away from the
Never,
same
never.
for me with the governance. I left Bloomberg. I stood up a governance program at Bloomberg and then
Mhm.
stepped away and I'm doing a startup now, but the enterprises I'm talking to, they're like, how do we inject spectral rules and the style guides and the documentation into their workflow? Developers won't go to Kubernetes or go to our style guide. How do you inject that into their workflow? And oh, can you check box the AI thing so my bosses are
Right.
happy and that kind of thing.
And
So
now they're standing up MCPs and we don't know where they are or what they're doing, right? There's that whole
yeah.
new question. Yeah.
So break down app security in the context of a developer's day to day. I mean, are we talking about like the app itself or like the practices and what a developer does or that like that, like using MCP servers that are unsanctioned or whatever?
So all that, like the shadow IT, the unsanctioned servers, all of that can be identified. That's part of the question, but it's more so if you're developing something that has secrets in it, right? Code that has secrets in it, or vulnerabilities, or you're using an open source repository or an open source piece of code that is vulnerable, right?
Mhm.
Identifying all of those things before they get to production, because once they get to production we found that 200 days is the average day length it takes to fix those problems.
Ouch.
Yeah.
And
So our whole thing is like preventative. Let's keep those things from
yeah.
getting there. So it's very much about identifying those vulnerabilities at the sweet spot of when is a developer most likely to fix those problems. And some people believe that it's in the IDE, when it's like you're currently coding, you immediately get an alert when something might be a secret or a vulnerability, and you should fix that thing immediately. My philosophy is that's a little too early because they're working on solving a problem at that time, and the problem is not security. The problem is the thing that they're building. And so that's a little early. That becomes too much noise. It's like too interruptive. That's
Mhm.
like breaking the flow, right? It's like, yeah, I can't focus on that thing right now. That's like you getting a Slack message at the time that you're trying to build something. It's like
Mhm.
I don't have
Mhm.
time for that. Too late would be like if you're trying to set up a CI/CD pipeline to push to production, and there's a gate, like a stoppage where security says, we identified these vulnerabilities. This thing
Yeah.
isn't going to production until these things are fixed. And that becomes an immediately like slow down of everything. And
Yeah.
then at that point, you're chasing the problem instead of preventing the problem. You're saying these 18 things, who introduced them? Where do they go? Who's gonna fix them?
Yeah.
What's like it's triage at that point.
Yeah. And you're in their way.
You're in their way, and you can't go to production. That's really, really important to a developer to see it to the end. Our sweet spot that we found is what we call the pipelineless approach. So don't need to set up a pipeline. Where are you in the production timeline? You're at the pull request or about to merge to pull request, and you get a scan that identifies these problems. Oh, I can fix those things before I go to code review
Mhm.
because I'm going to have my code reviewed anyway. And that we think is the sweet spot because it's not too much noise, right? When
Mhm.
you're trying to build the thing, it's not preventing you from going to production because you already have to have your code reviewed anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it identifies those things immediately in Slack or Microsoft Teams or PR, wherever you prefer to have those things identified for you. And we determine where you're most likely to fix the problem and when.
Yeah.
And we found that 72% of notifications that go to developers in Slack get fixed immediately.
Yeah.
92% of all things that are identified in Arnica are fixed before they ever get to production.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the sweet spot. It's like,
So,
oh, we're not inhibiting. We're identifying like this is the exact place in which a developer is most likely to fix the problem, and then the code review becomes clean and goes to production. So it's it's about knowing like the internals of Git and knowing when to pull
yeah.
those webhooks and know when the read the
Yeah.
diffs and know when things are going and know when to serve those alerts. Just
Yeah. And probably have to adapt to an enterprise's workflow, like how they use Git, what is their practices,
absolutely. How many
and
different repositories do they have? Which
yeah,
ones are actually in use? Who's using their personal Gmail account on GitHub to log in to their source code repository, right?
yeah,
Like there's all kinds of mapping that needs to happen to ensure that we have a full picture and
yeah.
100% coverage of that entire enterprise.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of trust that goes with those Slack messages, right? That you're not just DDoSing and it's not
Right,
useless or it's
right.
got to be contextually relevant. And,
Absolutely.
and does the developer have to be aware and trigger this, or is this, ideally scanning and seeing and finding the right context and then helping nudge them and guide them and
Yeah, for the most part, a developer has no idea that anything's even happening. They only become aware of a problem when a problem exists. So there's no false positives, right? Or there's fewer false positives because they don't have to wait for a scan in a CI/CD pipeline. It just
yeah,
happens in the
yeah,
background. I mean, it's a lot of con serving the right thing at the right time to the right person.
yeah,
That's the magic sauce, I think. But also it's very much dependent on your governance team, your AppSec team's policies,
hmm
right?
yeah,
Because you might have a lower appetite for threat or risk, so you might be a little bit more likely to, let's say, alert on lower, lower risk items that
yeah,
other teams might not care about so much.
yeah, yeah,
So it's very much about like what appetite do you have for risk and how do you set up your policies to make sure that those get addressed before anything
yeah,
happens. And we've seen that in like health tech and fintech and some of those more regulated industries where they have to adhere to higher standards than maybe a company that's trying to move a little bit faster and is less concerned with, some outdated, you know, open source package that has a lower score in terms of um, what we've identified as a threat.
yeah. And because you're aware and very familiar with that space, is when I would set up governance for large enterprises using spectral rules,
Mhm.
and I would, address that within different rule sets that are associated with different stages of the life cycle, but then different severities based upon the domain you're operating in. Because one, like you said, one group has higher or lower thresholds, and so that severity and when, I'm just and the maturity of the project. This is just a
Yep.
prototype. I'm not worried, or it's an internal thing. Oh
Right.
no, this is public, and we're in a highly regulated group. And so you got the bar is much higher. So I think you got to really understand that context.
Yep, and something we're developing for our customers is what we are calling sort of like tribal knowledge.
Mhm.
And it is that name is subject to change because of a variety of reasons, but it's basically sort of taking the context that your teams provide and training your, let's say, AI, SaaS, static application software testing, whatever scanner you might be using, training that on your internal team's knowledge. So, for instance, you might have a team that says, oh, we always dismiss these risks because they don't matter, or because, we've identified this as not a risk, but the tools we use always identify it as risk, but it isn't, right? And so it takes that intrinsic knowledge and it applies it going forward to the algorithm to say, oh, maybe because in an other company, it might be a high risk. In this company, this team has identified as lower risk for whatever reason. And then the AppSec practitioner, the person who's like moderating the tool itself, would be able to look at all those suggestions, right? That tribal knowledge and apply what they think is appropriate. So
Mm.
it's basically like when you have a movie screening and somebody says, "Oh, I didn't like this ending," or you have you, you have a feedback card, right? And so
Mhm.
yeah, you have the team telling you instead of just an AI determining it. It's
Yeah.
actual person to person knowledge, which I think is really interesting, a way to train the LLM from the team's actual experience. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's cool that we're actually sort of going into that realm.
I like that. That was gonna be my next question is how is AI impacting, your guys' workflow and how you guys, inject and bring this to groups. And I would say that reflects what I'm doing right now as far as I'm building a couple POCs that I mentioned to you earlier is bringing in spectral rules, design guidelines, and then like I'm using API ops, which would be lifecycle. But there's different variances depending on the team. Like what do you need there? And then bringing in, well, in this context, services, the APIs you're using. So you're using GitHub and Jira, and so I'm setting the context of the services and the documentation that goes with those, and the schemas and that all kind of creates a context window that I can deliver as an MCP server, and I'm playing, I'm still questioning how you inject that into large enterprises and get developers,
Sure.
to use it. The IDE, I think, is the common space you do. Copilot being another, but there's all kinds of, like you said, other variations of that depending on what testing, scanning stuff they're doing, what other, that tool set really sets that stage, I think.
So for us, so interestingly, the IDE we found in our research is at most 20% adoption across enterprises. And it's usually because of the noise problem that we talked about. And so, just because different people work different ways, and you might be like, I don't like hearing all this stuff while I'm developing. So you might just not opt in. And we know that opt-in is not always the best way of doing business, right? Especially from a governance perspective.
Yeah.
So for AI, what we're doing is we're taking the rules.md files for Claude, Copilot, all of these different AI code tools, and we are creating our own sets of policies that are injected at the point of code creation.
Mhm.
So the LLM has to follow those risk rules. So
Mm.
something similar you could do absolutely is take those and create your own rules file and amend
Yeah.
those rules.md files, because they do work.
Yeah.
And the LLM will listen to them, especially if there's an attestation at the PR level of what rules it did follow.
Yeah.
That's what we had to come to. We had to figure that out. We had to figure out, like, do we get a one-to-one?
Yeah.
Will an LLM follow our rule set? and we tweaked it and tweaked it and tweaked it, and finally, yes, we were able to make sure that that happens and have the attestation, which is basically almost like an SBOM of did the AI follow the rule set.
Yeah.
And we can see each and every line item in the PR where it does. So that's perfect because it doesn't slow anything down. The LLM is adhering to the rules that we've set forth. We're governing it, and the developer who's, vibe coding or using the AI tool doesn't have to deal with anything else. They don't have to deal with the security aspect of it because they can be assured that it is being followed.
Yeah.
It's just automatic. So yeah, that's our way of solving that problem. I could see it working for you absolutely. I think it's just a different set of rules,
Yeah,
different style.
exactly. And so speak a little bit more about the IDE part is because I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm gonna inject this in at the IDE level, and then you go, okay, well, how are you gonna do that? And like you said, I mean, like my VS Code started giving me, you want to take a survey in there, and I don't know who came up with that. I'm like, hell
I
no,
do
this
not.
is my sanctuary. Please get the hell out of here.
Leave me alone.
But then once you start going, well, you start tackling the IDE, go, well, we got to do VS Code, then we got to do IntelliJ, and you got to start doing, and then you get into these large organizations, and not only do they have mix of IDEs, there's no, like you said, the coverage is actually pretty, pretty spotty and pretty
Mhm.
small. And then even once you do attack it, rolling it out consistently and keeping it updated, that's a whole nother thing. So it sounds like the rules really hits the widest possible surface area that we can.
And at the source code level. Because that's where we're going to have the most coverage. We're going
Yeah.
to have it. Maybe, they an enterprise might use GitHub and GitLab, or they might use
Mhm.
Bitbucket and GitLab. Right. Whatever that mixture is smaller mixture,
Yeah.
and everyone's using source code.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is the source of truth. So if you can inject your code at that, or your code rules at that point, you have the most coverage.
And it's not at the pipeline.
Exactly.
So I would say the IDE and the pipeline are both problematic in the ways that we've discussed.
Mhm.
And targeting the source code and this kind of leveling of the playing field with the rules is pretty interesting.
And so, okay, great. You've done that, right? Now you've got your coverage. You still need a person to review that code. You still need something to touch that code to make sure that it is ready to go to production. So now you've created this huge amount of code review and still only a few, maybe one, two, three code reviewers to actually touch all of those pieces.
Yeah.
And that's another challenge that we're trying to tackle, right? That's the next piece because the developer workflow, hey, we've gotten there. We've pretty much tackled that and it's really efficient. We still need to focus on those people whose job it is to make sure that they're not necessarily the gatekeepers, but they're definitely the people you turn to make sure that code is quality and it's ready. And they're not only concerned with security, they're concerned with bugs, they're concerned with every element of good
Ah, yeah.
quality code, right? So that is absolutely something we're thinking about is how to make their jobs as efficient, effective, and governed as the AppSec teams whose job it is to really focus on security.
Well, and it feels like the rules are, similar to what I mentioned with the spectral rules is the rules is where you can start slicing and dicing and you guys can do this work for them by industry, by domain, by
Yep,
area, by
absolutely.
role, and that rule set that you guys are bringing to the table really becomes that ability, that negotiation and empowerment of these individuals.
Absolutely. And that's what we're hoping to enable. And um I mean it so far I've seen it work. So we call it Arnie AI, and it's pretty funny. So when our co-founders woke up one day and said we want to go in this AI direction, and for me as a humanist, I'm thinking, oh, okay, great, another AI story. Great. As a product marketer, I'm gonna have to try to differentiate this
Yeah.
thing and try to make it make sense. And is it gonna actually prove value, or is this just another buzzword? Blah blah blah. Right. But when I started to think about the actual capabilities, which are AI SAST, which is a just taking the static application security testing rule set, which is very static, and applying AI to it to make it more dynamic, That makes sense. A lot of competitors in the space, they're doing that too. That's not out of the ordinary. That's something that everyone is trying to get to try to make those rule sets more dynamic, learning, evolving, etc. Great. We were doing that. But there's that agentic rules enforcer, right? That injecting those cold rules at the time of AI code creation. What is that thing? Right? I was like, that's new. That's brand new. Nobody's ever done that. This is brand new. It's nascent.
Yeah.
What is that thing? And I was thinking, oh, okay. Well, if you think about it, it's really like a good robot who's trying to keep the bad robots in line.
Uh-huh.
Who does that? Oh, Terminator 2. Arnie does that. And so that's where Arnie was born from, because
Oh my
Arnica is our
God, I love
name.
you guys. That's so awesome.
And so you'll see this is Arnie's.
Yeah,
I like it. And
I
so,
love it.
we did this whole campaign was like, come with me if you want to vibe, like just having a lot of fun with the idea of like Terminator 2 is about a learning computer who is trying to keep the Skynet from
Mm,
taking over. And
yeah.
so it's like keep things in line, keep things working for humans, like things like that. So that was sort of my my aha moment of this can actually have like a humanistic real impact. We don't just need to be like buzzwords AI all over the place. This is a real thing.
So that for me, like, we've been on similar paths and trajectories, kind of coming full circle, I think
Like
here is
6 years now.
with governance. And
Mm,
so, I left Post, I set up the governance at Postman, left and went to do it at an enterprise. I could learn the people side and the product and business side because I was like, the engineering isn't really what's going, the rules, like, these things, these aren't the things that matter, but it's what everyone's talking about. And
mhm.
there's got to be more to it. And I realize it's mostly people
Yep.
is what's going on here. But what you're kind of describing to me is like the next generation of, I think, what used to be center of excellence, API governance, style guides and stuff like that, but for the things that actually matter. Like I don't think that all the style guides and pedantic things we cared about and Stoplight was built around matter as much as many of us did, or matter in the wider scheme. But what you're talking about are real application security level, actual things that are going to cost you money, cause you breaches, make sure you're not compliant to all the things that many people care about, not just engineering people care about,
I think a style guide can be impactful and matter. It's the enforcement part of it that's always been the question and the problem,
or the
right?
guidance, the,
The
the guiding of
guidance.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like, how do you actually make this thing work and
yeah,
apply, right?
yeah,
It's still a human reading it and doing it.
yeah,
But if there's an added level of automation and an added level of help to inject it at a point where it can
yeah,
actually be utilized, maybe you can actually start seeing some results and value from those style guides that you're creating.
yeah,
So we've reached that next level of application, and
yeah.
I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see it actually taking shape.
Well, and I like it that you guys are injecting it into developers' workflow, that there's a feedback loop there, but then
Mhm.
at that review level, that next higher level, because I think that's where the leads, the heads, the
Yep.
the
Real
the
money.
cross-cutting, yeah, yeah, are going to be negotiating this.
Yep.
Um, but there's another thing you kind of mentioned is, and I know you're very good at kind of absorbing this in a similar way I am as an evangelist, as a chief evangelist, you leading the marketing, being that front line and having to translate what's going on technically into business speak, but also technical and business speak and deal with the hype. And so like how are you like negotiating that as what you do as a storyteller? I mean, you this has to be real and get down to actual real things. It can't just be hype for you to be, I know your personality. Like you're not your bullshit, levels are in healthy ranges. And that's
Mhm.
why I talk to you. So speak to me about how you stay sane in this.
Oh, geez. How do I stay sane? Well, I mean, having real conversations absolutely helps, right? As talking to customers, their bullshit levels are high too, right? They're
Mhm.
like, I'm not buying this thing unless this thing works. I'm not testing this thing out if it's going to introduce vulnerabilities. Why would I take that risk?
Yeah.
Right? That's their whole thing. So if they believe in it, if they've seen actual results, if they have seen it impact their business with fewer vulnerabilities, that to me speaks volumes. And they're willing to talk about it. So something that really set me off as a product marketer and brought me some delight was last week we had our customer advisory council. And as you can imagine, application security, uh, those folks who are in the field are not that willing to talk publicly about what could potentially be problems, right, at their businesses. And it's not just them, but it could be as a directive of their business. Who knows, right? There's a lot of different factors that might prevent somebody from being on camera or going on record or giving a case study or all these different things. I was so happy to see such a slice of the folks we had at our customer advisory council saying, hand raising and saying, yes, I'll go on camera. Let me talk to you. Take them into this little back room, set them up on a camera, and just ask them about the evolution of their AppSec program. I didn't ask them a single question about Arnica. I didn't ask them a single question about our product. And yet, every single answer was Arnica helped us do this. Arnica has enabled us to do that. Right? So that to me says it does work. This
Yeah.
isn't just hype, right? This is actual validation from customers who are, one, willing to pay us, and two, willing to pay us more for AI products that we are developing with them.
Yeah.
That's validation.
Yeah. Agreed. I like it. So for AppSec, there was always a API security. I've ridden several waves of API security,
Mm-hmm.
people coming, being bought and going away, and then new ones coming and reinventing old problems. And then there was always the kind of chasm between application security and this newfound API security. And I've there are nuances and differences. There's uniqueness. But it's all kind of one and the same for me. There's not actually a lot of difference there, in my experience. And then now you have AI. And so what are your thoughts on those kind of divisions and evolutions and where we're at?
What do you do with an API? You build an application or you build an interface or you build something for someone to use or solve a problem. It's the same thing. You're doing the same things,
Yes.
right? So I think it's just different tools or different outlets, but the same sort of fundamental principles still apply.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes organizations are bigger and have, more complex needs or, whatever it is, they're more stratosphere. I don't know, but there's different appetite for different, types of groups. I see what that means, but I do absolutely see so many commonalities, and that was what was so easy to transition sort of my experience to AppSec is like, oh, I saw all this stuff with APIs, every single thing, center of excellence, governance, like all these questions, rule sets, developer experience, all of the same questions apply. It's just a different set of tools and a different outcome. So yeah, I see so many commonalities and I see so much synergy between, the problems that we're solving and there's space for everybody. I think. I think there's space for everybody. I think the who knows about what the dollar amount will be? Who knows what greed will lead for all of us? Who knows how many jobs will be cut because somebody decided AI was more important than any other version of whatever these tools are? That's not for me to decide. What for me to decide is to say, like, I'm solving problems and I'm trying to make sure everybody knows, like, this is how we're solving them.
I think we're in the same realm there. And
Absolutely. We always have been, I think.
yeah, and just trying to, and you got to be grounded and you got to, and I realized early on that the API problems weren't technical. They were
Sure, sure.
business and they were
Business. Yep.
people and which take policy and coordination and, communication to solve. It's not, and that's why I like what you guys are doing with the rules, I would say is, an artifact and very technical, but very human, centered in the developer workflow, the review, the up all the way up the chain. And I'm guessing you guys could even get to the level where, center of excellence, cross-cutting, not just security, but compliance, wider compliance, what leadership's going to care about, what regulatory is going to care about when it comes, like and what's going on in the EU versus US right now.
Yep.
I think you guys have your kind of finger on that pulse that can rise to that level, I guess.
Absolutely. And we have seen that. We've had a lot of, European people reach out to us and ask us for help.
Yeah.
One thing that's really interesting is not just engineering teams use Arnica. We'll have like legal and compliance teams using Arnica too. And it is because, they want to ensure that these organizations are compliant. For instance, software composition analysis, one of the main components of that is determining whether you're using licensing correctly for software, right? So a legal team might be really, really interested in that. So they might want to see reports of, what is being out of compliance, what is out of scope for them. So yeah, I mean that's crazy that a legal team might log into an AppSec tool, or not even log in, just get a report from this AppSec tool and find value in it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, my experience is the people who care about this stuff aren't always the people directly doing the stuff.
Yep.
And it's the people who have to clean up the mess down the road, down the way, after the way, which tends to be some I've seen it, especially in compliance stuff. I mean, female-led groups, to be honest, is like sometimes those guys aren't always paying attention to it, and then it's like other people paying attention in details and connecting the dots down the road and actually have to answer to the customer. And so it's just a kind of a different way of looking at the details than those of us in the weeds building things. So,
We've found that we have the most success if you don't ever have to log into Arnica.
mm,
You get your notification on Slack with your context of what the vulnerability is. Here's a snippet of how to fix it. You've fixed, approved, ready to go. That's it.
that doing governance, that's where I've got the most friction is trying to convince people to get out of their tools and go to some other tool. And
Hmm.
I just stopped uh trying that. I just
Yeah.
what do you use? Where's your head every day? Oh, you're in a spreadsheet. Oh, you're in a dashboard. You're in Notion. It's like
Mhm.
depending on where they're at, I'll inject whatever you
Yep.
need there and give it to you there. And
That's
I
the way
think
to do it.
Slack, yeah. Yeah. So you guys are fine with that though? Like your app,
Love
I
it.
mean, so many people are worried about their app and the eyeballs and their metrics on it, but you guys are fine if they're just paying the bill
Not,
and using the
we're
hell out
more
of
than
it.
fine. That's our ethos.
Nice.
Our ethos is pipelineless, developer native.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's
Do you like that? Thank you.
I think I think that's a good one. I think that's the note that I would end this on right there. I think that's where it's at because that's gonna cut through all that hype and BS and all the other things I think that are problematic um but what keeps you human right now in this age? Just not from work or anything, just you.
Yeah. Well, I've really gotten into physical media and specifically preservation of VHS tapes. So I have a
Ooh,
really extensive VHS tape collection. And I go to a lot of like dead media swaps and things where I take my collection and vend. And yeah, we have a couple coming up. One is called Michigan is Dead, which will be in March. And it has, some horror folks, some action folks. I'll be vending there. Yeah, I'm a big VHS collector.
nice. My kiddo is that she's getting her library sciences degree at University of Washington right now in Seattle, and she has a massive collection and she knows all the stores, the hands-on, the record and book and movie store kind of in the hole
Well,
in the
yeah.
wall place,
Seattle has Scarecrow video, which is one of the greatest.
That's awesome. So I think that I have the Onion newspaper on my coffee table right now, which I'm loving right now as I tune out so much. But trying to create, and I have my jazz collection over here is keeping me going right now. My vinyl is my new thing. So it's good to hear.
Love it. Love the preservation of the physical, right? Because so much of the stuff is when you talk about ownership, right? When you talk about licensing, they can rip that stuff away from you at any time. A server could go down and you never have a thing again. Can you imagine that? Can't imagine it.
Well,
So, yeah, having it in person is good.
I went to see Ken Burns at the Met and
Mhm.
talk about the Revolutionary War documentary they just did, and he was talking about him and his the lady who made the documentary with her. I wish I remembered her name. I feel bad now, but they were talking about just the provenance of the object. They're like, because he's really against reenactments unless
Mhm.
there's like a document or a teapot, but that teapot has to be from Boston from that age, and they have to pay the licensing for it. He said that was an important thing. And so when it came to, they were like, well, there's there's gaps where, the Revolutionary War didn't have, we had to use paintings from the time and from after, and there's not newsreels or photos. So we had to commission some artwork to be done. So we actually paid human beings to do it, and that were experts in their area. Some of them were indigenous. And then they talked about, well, we needed a voice. We didn't use AI. We went through our Rolodex, found a person who had the gravelly voice and could do the thing. And so I think that that matters a lot right now. So
Oh, more than anything, more than ever, more than ever. Geez. And just the the prevalence of slop is just everywhere. I love that tactical feel. It's
yeah.
really important.
Well, I've taken enough of your time. We're 40 minutes in, so